1 and then jump to number 3 if the applicant is not available. Number 1 is approval of the regular minutes of the June 17th meeting.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Same sign. The motion is approved. The minutes are approved. We'll go to number 3, discussion of the planning application fees. Dean?
Well, as our background information tells you, the planning fees haven't really been thoroughly looked at and revised to reflect cost changes or other trends since really 1994. I was going to just start by mentioning that in 1981 there was a change where if you had a rezoning application or planned development district or subdivision plat, what the applicants were asked to do was basically put down a deposit, and then I guess similar to a approach of a law firm or maybe some engineering firms, then the case once it started was billed, and so the planning staff members and others that did things associated with that kept track of their time, as well as the cost of publishing an ad or the cost of mailing letters. That was all tabulated, and so the initial deposit was just that, a deposit, and then when the case was completed, essentially a bill was calculated for the applicant, and that was sent to the applicant at the end of the case. Maybe that system came closer to recovering actual costs associated with processing an application and the numerous steps involved, but it was also time-consuming for the staff to track all those on different cases. It was not real predictable for the applicant when they were coming in to know what their fees were going to be, and then it was also a case where we had some cases where an application didn't work out or it was denied, and then it was difficult to recover the rest of the bill or the fee. And so that was dropped in 1989, and the planning went back to the fixed fee approach. And the other thing that occurred about that time is that conditional use permits used to be considered by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that was transferred to the Planning Commission, and the fees were adjusted accordingly. In 2001, a separate and new permit was created for wireless communication facilities, which is really deals with cell towers and antennas, and that was added to the fee schedule, and the City Commission approved a partial waiver or waiver for not-for-profit social service agencies, which was incorporated into the fee schedule. I think what John has done is, and this usually doesn't involve the Planning Commission much, other than the fact that usually in the upper part of your application that's in your packet, it will have you'll have the fee that was paid for that particular application. But presently, if somebody wants to annex their property into the city, there's no application charged for that. There's some staff time involved in helping with the application or developing a legal description, that type of thing. Usually you're seeing annexation requests that are together with maybe another type of application like a plat or a rezoning application. The administrative permit is something that we do in-house. That is if we're issuing a permit for somebody to co-locate an antenna on an existing tower, or we have antennas that are put on buildings. There's one on I think the 4th floor of the Science Building at Kansas Wesleyan, things of that nature, usually associated with the cellular phone service. Appeals have been in change since 1994. We have presently do not charge for a certificate of appropriateness or compatibility application that goes to the Heritage Commission or Design Review Board. If you come and you get a conditional use permit, say for a daycare center inside a home, the fee is $80. If you're building a new structure, it's $160. The final site plans that you see on different commercial projects, the fee for that is $110. We don't charge for floodplain development permits. You don't see lot splits. Those are approved by staff, but we currently don't charge for that. The occupancy certificate, I think that has been increased to $50 since this was published. The other ones have pretty much been unchanged. Some of these, I think we see some cost-related, inflation-related adjustments. Two that stick out for us are the street name change and the sign permit, where those fees probably do not reflect very well the actual costs or the complexity of those involved. Presently, if you've got a large department store and you've got 5 or 6 different wall signs you're putting up, you can get that covered in one $20 permit. We don't charge per sign, we charge per application. Certainly a wall sign or something, or a change out, is one thing. If you're talking about a 65-foot tall interstate sign that has large footings and things of that nature, that's a little more complex. Signs that have electrical service are more complex than those that don't. Do you have that other slide, John? Did Linda email that to you? I think it's that bottom right-hand one, John. This is what we presently charge. We do charge separately if you have a pole sign and a ground sign. Those are separate permits and fees, but basically you can cover a lot of signage for a property with the one $20 fee. We did a survey of what other Kansas communities were charging. If you put up a bank ground sign in Salina, the fee is $20. If it's in Leawood, it would be $200. Overland Park uses a fee plus square footage of sign method. I think the Olathe method seems like, and I defer to Patrick on that, but that seems like that would be awfully cumbersome each time to try to calculate what the cost, the construction cost. I think the idea is that the bigger, more complex signs would have a larger permit fee, but that seemed kind of cumbersome. Mission had a flat fee plus square footage. Johnson County, Kansas was just a $75 per sign. Lawrence charged per sign. And then there was different complexities. I'm not sure about the fraction, but that's what Wichita uses, is $25 flat fee plus $6 for every 10 square feet of sign area. And so I think you see the different variations there. The two things that no other community does is they all charge per sign, which we don't, and they also, some of them either have a formula where, based on the larger size, the square footage, or others, that there's an additional fee involved based on the larger size of sign. So if you could go back to the top there, John, and I didn't know, you may have some experience in other jurisdictions that we didn't list here, Patrick, but did you have any thoughts about what your experience had been in different jurisdictions?
We're finding a lot of places, Concordia, for example, they do a charge for the application. The permit application is one charge, and then the fee for the permit is another charge, and it's based on a flat charge plus square footage. And to me, it seems like the square footage charge is a reasonable and equitable way to do it. You know, obviously, Darwin can attest to this. There's a lot of legwork involved. Looking up the zoning district, checking to see if there's any obstructions or anything in the way, seeing what not everybody knows this, but every sign permit has to have an inventory put along with it of the existing signs that are in the place, and that takes time to check that stuff out. I can imagine it takes us a long time to build a sign permit. I know it takes you a long time to check one. So to me, it would just seem reasonable that there would be a you know, I don't know, and maybe administratively you don't want to address that, but it seems to me that it's not unreasonable to expect that there would be a fee for the application, and then also a fee for the permit based on, I would say a fair way to do it would be a base fee plus so much per square foot.
Has it been your experience that we're probably the only place that if you're erecting 4 wall signs that most places those would be 4 signs and 4 sign permits, or are they?
Unless you get to a real small town. We did a couple of signs in Phillipsburg here the other day, and it was a flat $10 charge, and they didn't care to see the signs or the plans. They just wanted the fee. So, but yes, I would say, unless you're in a very small town, Salina is a value.
Well, that was the main thing I was struck by, is that we don't, if you're putting up 4 or 5 wall signs, we just cover that still in the one permit regardless of size, or we charge the person putting up 1 sign the same as the person putting up 4 signs, and that, I'm not sure if that's equitable or not, but you think square footage is a reasonable method to
and that would go
sliding
along
scale?
Yeah, even if you did want to put that on I would say it would be reasonable, say somebody did want to put 4 wall signs up, you're looking at the property and stuff anyway, that minimum charge plus the square footage would give you, you know, say if each sign was 32 square feet, that would give you the, you know, enough volume dollar-wise to recoup some of the costs in researching that. Am I missing anything, Darwin? Don't
I don't think so.
jump in there if you...
Well, that is not it's kind of a mixed fee between planning, because much of the regulation of signage is in the zoning code, but also on the building services, building permit side, in the review side of that. So it's not a pure planning fee, but that one and street name change, there's a lot of things involved in that in terms of contacting owners, if you have multiple owners, making sure everybody's aware, and then of course if you do change the name of a street, there's about somewhere between 12 and 15 agencies that have to be contacted, and maybe more than that. We had one that was done this year in a river trail where on the original plat the street was Saddlebrook Court, and the owners, the developers of River Trail, came before you. They had 3 changes, and one of them was Ben Court, and I believe Mr. Funk voted against that change. But
all those.
When we did our research, we found that the original developers still owned all the lots, but there was people who had a contract to purchase one of the lots, and every piece of information that they had, you know, contracts, title insurance policy, everything was under Saddlebrook Court. And they actually came in and applied for a permit to build a house on Saddlebrook Court, and we said, well, that's not Saddlebrook Court anymore. Well, since they weren't a record owner, we didn't know who the future buyers were. There wasn't any way to notify them. What we do is we record that change in the Register of Deeds office, so it becomes a public record, and then all the maps get changed and everything. And then, of course, the final step is if there's a street sign up there already, that street sign has to be changed out. So we think those two are particularly undervalued. And I don't, John, do you have the fee summary table from the other communities on the planning fees?
I don't have that available.
Okay. That is in your packets, and try to, it's the one that goes crossways on your page, but what we tried to do, and you would have our current fees in front of you, but there's pretty much a tendency for, you'll see that fees are really almost proportional to population, that some of the communities that are slightly smaller than Salina have slightly lower fees, and that you get to the opposite end of the eastern Kansas or Topeka and Wichita, and our fees look pretty small in comparison. So if you were doing a preliminary plat in Wichita, the fee would be $660 plus $14 charge per lot. In our case, it's $215 plus $2 a lot. So there's different approaches there. I think most communities have a per lot charge for subdivisions. Ours is $1 and $2, and there's some that follow that, and some communities just have a flat fee. So I'll let you take that table in a little bit, but I think what we're looking for from the commission standpoint or perspective is it acceptable to you to look at that? If you could go back to our current list, John, and I guess what we're looking for is your thoughts or your about staff looking at this comprehensively and trying to, we'll say, correlate the application fee more closely with the actual costs and with the complexity of the application. I mean, one approach would be to say, well, it's time, and we need to tack 5% on all the current fees. What we would rather do is look at some of these and see which of these are really undercharged or undervalued based on the amount of either direct costs or staff time or even commission time involved. So I guess not so much to go through item by item, but is the commission comfortable with us looking at more of a cost recovery approach? And some of these fees we might recommend no change on. I know for sure lot splits and things like that, we think some sort of application fee is appropriate, and some of these may be in need of an adjustment more so or larger than others. But is the commission as a whole comfortable with the approach of trying to look at our costs and our time involved in setting the fees adjustments that way, as opposed to just going across the board and saying this is what it's always been and it's 5%? Is there any thoughts that direction?
I think the fees should more directly reflect the administrative time involved to prepare them.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, most of these look pretty low compared to everybody else.
Is there a philosophy of the Salina City Commission that a certain percentage of a department's cost ought to be recovered by the users?
there historically has been in the building permit or building services side. The philosophy in planning has more been to make sure that the city is recovering its costs on many of these, in addition to staff time, research, field trips, those kind of things. The other aspects on many of your cases is postage. I mean, we send out a lot of letters on to notify nearby property owners. Postage rates have continued to increase, and we're still doing the actual, email is works for some things, but the law still requires direct mailing. We're sometimes out posting a sign on the property, and then we're also advertising. We're required on many of these to put a public notice in the newspaper, and the charge per line for those types of legal notices has continued to increase. So there's two aspects. One is looking at the staff time, the actual administrative time involved, and then the other thing is that the proportion of those fees that get eaten up by the postage and by the publication costs have continued to rise, and a lot of these things are, there is also, like in the case of a street name change or something like that, we prepare a resolution. The city records that resolution as a public duty and public service, but the Register of Deeds charges us a fee to record it. We don't necessarily recover that directly. So that would be the other thing that we're looking at. There's a lot of these end up with a document or something that gets recorded, and if it's serves the public, we're going to record that in the Register of Deeds office, and the city's going to pay that recording fee to make sure that it happens. So those would probably be the main things that we would be looking at, and it just varies. You've seen the open air markets, the flea markets come before you. Some of those are relatively simple. Some of those are more complex. We can't always predict that, but as opposed to going back and having all the staff track their minutes and hours spent doing things, it would seem like looking at closer to a direct cost recovery approach would be one direction we could go. I mean, I believe the benchmark historically for building permits and building services was about 80% of their budget recovered through permit fees and things of that nature. Historically in planning, it's been between 10 and 15%, and so it's not the idea that we're supporting our operations with our fees, but just setting the fees so they're proportional to the direct costs and to some cases the complexity of the task.
Can you explain why this?
Or a nod of the head?
Well, I mean, if there's, I guess we're just looking for a consensus. If there is a consensus among the planning commissioners that we should look at each of the fees individually and the value on those, then we would take that as an endorsement from the commission to take that approach.
I have
May I ask if there's a consensus? Would everyone agree that we want the planning department to look at each one of these fees? And
right, but I have a question though. For the subdivisions, why do they have half off versus the rest of Salina?
Well, what we do is if you have an area that you're platting and it's just outside the city limits, well, you have to file an application both with the county and with the city. So instead of getting the double jeopardy where you're paying the county's full fee and our full fee, we agreed that since you have to file with both places, that we would cut our fee in half so you're not penalized by having to do the two applications. Mm-hmm. So that half fee is based on the fact that you're having to file 2 applications with both jurisdictions.
Did we get a consensus nod that we want the?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Dean. If you would.
Are these
Yeah.
fees in line with what the county charges also? I mean, there is
Um,
no discrepancy.
I don't think there's any great discrepancy, and I think on plats and some of theirs, their fees are higher than ours. But they're pretty consistent with what the county charges. We have a lot more types of applications
Oh, sure.
than they do, but for a basic zoning or platting application, our fees are pretty close to each other.
Don't ask for a raise for 6 months because people will blame us.
Well, I don't know what the effective date. I mean, some
Yes,
cases
indeed.
fees will change on January 1st. In some
Sure.
cases, they change when a budget is adopted in August. We'll see, but we thought it was timely to go in there and re-examine that. But
Yeah,
we
they look pretty cheap compared to the cities our size, what we've seen, so.
And you're saying nobody. Okay. Well, we'll go back to item 2, I believe. This is, I'll give you the, well, we have the history and background. We know how streets are normally done. This is the way they're not normally done. But most of the times, your involvement in looking at streets and street names is a developer comes before you and they have a plat layout to create a subdivision with lots and blocks and streets, and part of the Planning Commission's function is to review those street names. Most of the focus is to make sure that we don't duplicate names or that we don't have, because the 911 system and all is very dependent on street names. We would rather not have a Smith Street that's spelled S-M-Y-T-H-E or something of that nature, which could cause confusion, or have somebody come in and say, well, we'll call ours Smythe and the other one can be Smith. So we want to avoid duplication, confusing sounding names, or anything that might be difficult for get lost in translation. And the main focus is 911 and emergency response. But once you have approved a plat, then that plat gets recorded. When the plat's recorded, those street names become official. They get put on the official street map of the city, and then everybody starts using those for addressing purposes, for establishing water and service, gas and electrical service. 911 uses it, post office uses it. So as I noted, when we change a street name, there may be 12 or 15 different agencies that have to be notified of that change, because their records are based on the existing street name. And then it comes to changing the street name. We had a situation once where we had a street, and I guess it's all right to use names, but we had a street that was Etherington Court, and it was over by the golf course. And everybody who lived and owned a house on that street decided they didn't like Etherington Court, and they signed a petition asking for that name to be changed, and it was changed to Golfview Court. And that was done by the unanimous petition of everybody who owned a house on that street. We've had a case where something may not have been recognized at the time of original approval. We had a plat come through for Woodland Hills Estates, and it had a street that some of the lots at the time, the way they were platted, weren't buildable, and they couldn't. The surveyor just said, well, we'll call it No Build Street, and we said, well, maybe Noble would be better than No Build, so it became Noble. And then the fire department said, well, our records show we've got Noble Court, and it's way on the west side of town, and Noble Drive's on the east side of town. That could cause confusion, so we got with the developer, and that was changed to Greystone Drive, which is over there in Woodland Hills and being built on today. We had a situation in East Salina where we had Marymount Road, and it curved into Mariposa Drive. And then at the east end, we had Cloud Street that ran out to Markley Road. There was a developer that requested that that whole segment be renamed to Cedar Ridge Drive. And so that's the way that is today. In this particular case, we had a strip of land that was developed and designed to be a roadway to get back to a facility that didn't have frontage on Centennial Road. And so a 60-foot street was carved out to make sure that there was roadway access. That later became a location for what was Dynamold, which was a business at the east end of the runway. Back in 1977, the Board of Directors for the Airport Authority prepared a deed and signed it, executed it, and recorded it that dedicated that 60-foot by 475-foot strip over to the city of Salina. It did not go to the city commission. They didn't ever accept the dedication, so there was no real record that had occurred. The city didn't take responsibility for the road, didn't patch potholes, didn't have a name, didn't have a street sign, but all the records indicate that strip of land is owned by the city of Salina. What's never been resolved is what entity is responsible for maintenance of that, and it's never been used for addressing because it didn't have a name. So you have businesses and properties that are tucked back away from Centennial Road that have a Centennial Road address. This was looked at pretty extensively by staff and the city commission. One of the things that was done is an estimate to what it would take to upgrade that, put curb and gutter on it, a full turnaround, those types of things, and the price for that got out of hand for what you were going to get for it, and the majority of the owners looked at those and said they didn't want to participate in that. They just would like to leave everything the way it is and have the city take over responsibility for it and to give it a name. And so the name that came forward in their application is Copper Court, and we have not found any similar sounding or conflicting name in either the city or the county, so that from our perspective should work as a street name. What we had was we had a petition earlier for a different name that did conflict with another name, and that petition was signed by all of the 6 property owners that had frontage. This request did not receive the support on a petition from all 6 owners. And so the purpose of this hearing today with the Planning Commission is that we have notified all of the owners, invited them to either comment to us or attend this hearing and give their feeling on Copper Court as a street name. Even though we have not gotten any feedback of any kind, so there's a couple different ways to read that, but our approach was if the petition says Copper Court, this hearing in front of the Planning Commission is the opportunity for anybody who has property on that to object to that street name. And so our recommendation is lacking any strong objection from any of the owners, and they've all been notified that we would recommend approval of that street name request. If that recommendation is favorable, then a resolution would be prepared for the City Commission to accept the roadway for public use and maintenance, and also to assign it a name. That would be recorded in the deeds office. We would erect a street sign out at that corner. There's not one today, And then the properties at the rear who have their sole access off of Copper Court would need to be readdressed. And I think most of them understand that concept, but the purpose of today's hearing was to get any input from those owners, whether they objected or saw this as a hardship or were concerned about readdressing or any of those items. And the applicant who filed this on behalf of Superior Plumbing has indicated that nobody from there is going to be attending, and I don't think we have any other owners here. So our recommendation is, absent any strong objections, would be to recommend approval of Copper Court for this street segment.
The city is not...
Basically, we're talking about these properties here that would have to have a Copper Court address, and then Harbin Construction has frontage on Centennial, as does this building. They would have the option to retain the Centennial address.
Would that be confusing? You have the two buildings which obviously go off Copper Court. That's how you get to them. Have a Centennial address.
Well, that's not because the city has a policy of restricting driveway access to arterial streets. It's not unusual. For instance, the New Horizons Dental Clinic, that's north of Wendy's there, you have to pull onto Brock Road to get in there, but they do have frontage on Ohio. You know, many businesses like that think it's easier for people to find them. All we do is require that if you have a Centennial Road address, then you've got to have your address numerals on the Centennial Road side so that you can be found. But basically, if these two wanted to stay unchanged with Centennial Road addresses, that would be okay. These interior lots, I think this is Superior Plumbing here, they would have a Copper Court address, and we would work with them on that.
Now, at this time, they have Centennial addresses?
Yes, all of these are addressed. I think this is 2201 and this is 2203, and I'm not sure what this is, but most of them recognize that if you drive up and down Centennial Road, you're probably not going to see Superior Plumbing, and you're really not going to know where to turn. So from that standpoint, I think there's support for a name change and having a sign at the intersection.
And what about the condition of the street? It doesn't meet city standards?
It does not have curb and gutter, but it does have a 15-inch base. Most of our streets have about an 8-inch base, so from that standpoint, it's pretty good. And we have done some sealing and filling of potholes and things of that nature. So the main thing is it's got 60 feet of right-of-way, and it's got a good pavement base. It just doesn't have curb and gutter, and there's no functional cul-de-sac or anything down at this end. So those are the main areas in which it does not comply with city street standard.
What about fire for the guy down at the end of the block? Can the fire trucks get in and around there?
Well, they can get in there. They will have they've got to get into here to turn around and get out, but that really doesn't change the physical nature of it. Doesn't change if you give it a name, then it becomes city maintained. So it's kind of making the best of existing conditions. But as I said, we identified the 6 owners. We sent them notice. We invited them to attend today if they had any concerns or objections about the name.
Are there any other questions of staff? Are there any members of the audience who want to speak to this application? There being none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
I'd make a motion we approve application M08-6.
I'll second it.
A The motion's been made and seconded to approve application M08-6. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried, and application M08-6 is approved. Do we need to make any further motions about the next steps, or that's included in the first motion?
I think that's more just for informational purposes, and that will all be addressed when it gets in front of the City Commission.
All right. Then the next item on the agenda is application number 4, or number 4 on the agenda, excuse me, application Z07-23 filed by the Salina City Commission requesting amendment of Article 10, signs by amending sections 42-503, 42-504, 42-506, 42-507, and sections 42-516 through 42-524 relating to the installation of billboards and digital electronic display signs. Continued discussion of terms and definitions from the June 17th meeting.
Well, I think the main focus here is that we talked about treating maybe the time and temperature type signs, and Patrick mentioned the electronic price changer signs, which are becoming more and more frequent, which are just basically graphic letters and numbers, and distinguishing those from the other types of signage. And I think, I mean, it's all kind of, it's not confusing, but just say the pieces do not fit neatly together. We have an ordinance, and the ordinance refers to electronic message board signs, yet we don't have a definition in our own code of what electronic message board sign is or what all it entails. And then we also do use the term time and temperature sign in our ordinance, but we don't define it. And so the question is, one approach is to just simply call it time and temperature sign, classify it, define it, or you could take a slightly broader definition that could include the price changer signs as well, and that becomes one category, and then the other category is the more illuminated, image-changing, digital type of sign. So what we did was we talked a little bit about coming up with a comprehensive term that would encompass what it is we're talking about. So I went back, we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, and some of the terminology that we have found that is in current use, maybe Wichita was the closest to ours, and then was further broken out, but Daktronics, which is a manufacturer of these types of signs, they call them digital display signs. The American Planning Association uses the term digital video display signs to, and this would refer to our types of signs that we have with Dairy Queen and Sonic, and those with the video image or the animation and those types of things. In Minnesota, they have tended to use the term dynamic sign for the image-changing signs, and so from there, in their world, a billboard with a papered-on image is a static sign. A billboard that has changing images and has 6 ads a minute, that would be a dynamic sign. And the City of Wichita uses electronic message sign, and City of Des Moines uses electronic display and video display sign. And so what we have done is just give you kind of a menu or sample of different definitions. These first 3 came from the City of Des Moines. I actually like the their term and definition for video display sign, because the ones that you see at Sonic and Dairy Queen, I'm not so sure that video display sign isn't about the best term to describe those, but it talks about what is essentially, some of those are almost television or plasma screen type video images. The multi-vision sign is really where you have the billboard and it almost has, or a sign, and it has louvers on it, and it shows you one image one way, and instead of the image dissolving and something coming back, the louvers turn, and when they flip, you see a different image. So to me, a time and temperature sign or a price changer sign could fit within, say, that definition that Des Moines has for electronic display sign. To me, that could include a time and temperature. The multi-vision sign covers the one that has the flipping back and forth, or the rotating, and then the video display sign is the one that has the one like Speedy Cache, or one where the images are almost digital video quality. The one that Wichita has talks about animation, flashing, blinking, pulsating, fading or dissolving, scrolling. So to me, a time and temperature sign could fit into that as well, unless it was pulled out. And then the one that Lincoln, Nebraska has talks about automated method of changing copy, and it gives examples of public service time and temperature, and date sign, message center, or reader board. That, I think when they use the term copy, they're more talking about the text and the numbers. The other thing that's kind of disappointing is that hundreds of cities define billboard the same way, which isn't really structural or size related. They define it as a sign which directs attention of the public, business, or activity that's sold or offered at a different location than where the sign is located. And there used to be a sign that was on Crawford that directed you to the Wendy's on Broadway, and the sign was about 10 square feet. Well, that is a sign that is located on a different premises that directs you to your attention, but that's not a billboard. So I've been disappointed in what we found today. One community, Olathe, ties it back to 200 square, a face of 200 square feet or more. But I think what we would like to get at is can we come up with a we'll say two definitions, one that will include the time and temperature and the price changer type signs, which would probably be permitted in more locations, and then the how you distinguish that from the ones that are more in the Speedy Cache category. And of the ones I've seen, to me, the definition that Des Moines, Iowa has with the video display sign is, to me, the closest of giving a separate category for the Speedy Cache type sign. But, I mean, Walgreens has an electronic changeable copy sign, but it's really more like a time and temperature type sign than it is Speedy Caches. So to me, those are two different types of signs. They're both electronic, they're bothable message signs, but is there a good way to come up with a definition or a distinction where one might be permitted some locations and not in others.
Again, I want to stress from the capability standpoint, and for around here, I can't think of one that comes to mind, but what you see in electronic highway billboards right now is a message that's up there for 10 seconds, and it's the same thing. There's no moving parts to it or anything else. And then the next frame is another frame that's a set message, and there's no moving image to it. That system, although it's not showing that, does have the capability of looking exactly like Speedy Cache. It does have the capability of what they call in and out effects, where things swirl when it's coming up to the message and then they fade out and then the next message comes back in. They have that capability, but they're not, in Wichita's case, and I believe in Kansas City's case, for example, they're not allowed to do that. What they have to have is a static message. So I think in my own mind, I qualify those two as together. What was the example you used besides Speedy Cache? Walgreens?
Well, if you look at and you may say that sign has more capability than that, but that's pretty much a sign that is very similar to time and temperature price changer sign in terms of its graphic capabilities, and that all it really does is display numbers and letters.
Yeah, and those can be changed over again. That actually Walgreens, Daktronics has the contract for Walgreens, and those can display more than what they are displaying right now. So to me, I think that there's a big division between any kind of electronic message center and a time temperature or a gas price changer or a motel price changer. That would be another category that we hadn't talked about, but there are some motels that use those for pricing. But and it's like that we've always said, we think that a lot of the responsibility lies in the programmer. The Speedy Cache could also be made to look like Walgreens, conversely. It could be made to show messages in a different way. So I think that anything that has the capability of changing, of running a graphic and text together is an electronic message center, versus something that can only do numbers such as a time temperature or a price. The time temperature ones, if I'm not mistaken, are strictly that, the ones that are standalone units and can only do that, and then the price changer ones also are only letters with a dollar sign in there. So they only have the capability of just doing those functions. They do not have the capability of putting a word up there per se.
Well, John, could you, and maybe that's the city of Johnston, Iowa uses electronic message center sign. And their definition is a sign that is electronically or electrically controlled that displays a message center or reader board composed of a series of lights that may be changed through electronic means. And I guess what we're struggling with is why couldn't or wouldn't a time and temperature sign fit within that definition? To us, it seems like it would.
I agree, it would. I think, if you want to know the truth, I think all of these things are somewhat, scattered. It'd be nice if you looked in the Webster's Sign Dictionary and got the definition.
I think we might be looking at this backwards, though. Time and temperature will fall into those signs, but those signs will not fall into the time and temperature sign.
Correct.
So what really we need to do is, and I like where you're going with that, is basically link any of the video display signs into Des Moines, Iowa's definition, which I think is very good, and then just differentiate time and temperature. Like I say, we keep saying, well, time and temperature could do it, but provided we say that if you get a time and temperature sign, you are only allowed to display time and temperature in, I think there's only, one area where they can use it that other signs can't go.
I think that's a good point. In my recollection, time and temperature would have a maximum of 5 characters. Is that correct? Time would be 4, temperature would be 3, if you used a colon as a character.
You could,
Price, if, let's say a high-end motel is over $100 a night, that would be 5 characters. I guess what I'm saying is, if you could put in there some distinction that a time, temperature, or pricing sign was limited to 5 characters, I think that you would naturally withdraw that from the group of the other animated signs. Is that, I'd like to defer to Darwin a little bit. He's got to work with this thing. Is that a reasonable?
I really couldn't tell you right now, Pat. I don't break it down that much.
well, I like that one definition that's in there with time and temp. There's one in there that looks pretty good from Olathe, sign displaying time or temperature information with no additional advertising or comments other than the name of the company which owns the sign. I think that's fair. I mean, granted, a neighbor would have to complain if there was more messages, and there is a little bit of public awareness, but at least we have a definition there. So we could use that as our time and temperature definition, and Des Moines Iowa as our video display sign. We could almost combine their electronic display and video display sign as our, even that multi-vision, I guess. Those 3 all work pretty well.
Yeah, I think for us, the issue is, and I'll use the example of the insurance agency at Highland and Cloud. They're zone C1. They can have a time and temperature sign. They cannot have a electronic message center sign. But since we don't really define those, and until, I guess the way we look at it is get good definitions that distinguish the two, and then create a box on the sign permit application that says I'm applying for a time and temperature sign, or I'm applying for an electronic message center sign that's video display, and then that helps Darwin and everybody else classify what the sign is. But that's what we're really struggling with. And the other part is the fact that we have districts that allow the time and temperature, but they don't allow the other types of signs, and that's why it's important to have a definition that sets them apart.
I'm trying to think. There's a motel over there at Magnolia and 9th Street that has a digital pricing sign on there.
First Gold Inn.
Okay, what is that? Does anybody know the zoning of that right off the top of their head?
You're talking about 9th and Magnolia,
Yes.
southeast corner.
Yes.
Oh, the old
That
Howard
would be
Johnson's.
C5,
C5.
service commercial, which would be one of our more liberal
So they-
districts as far as signage goes.
I guess what I'm trying to think of, is there any place where a time, temperature, a pricing sign, as far as like a gas station or a motel, that wouldn't be zoned enough to include it in the digital message center anyway?
No, in our C1 or C2 type zones, you can't have a motel or you can't have a gas station for the most part, so you don't have to worry about that. They do allow banks and financial institutions, and I don't know how, that's an insurance office that has that time and temperature sign.
So we don't even really need to worry about the gas pricing or the other stuff, the motel's pricing anyway then, is that right?
If most of those are probably going to occur in a district where some sort of electronic message center or
Would be
video display sign might be allowed.
Well, I think just breaking out the time temp, the one right above Olathe there is fine with me.
I agree.
Yeah, looks good.
Would it be, I guess the way I would look at it is, I was looking at having, whether we call it, we've got all these terms that are similar in our own ordinance. We have electronic message sign. We also have I think we have the computer operated electronic message sign, but that becomes kind of the big umbrella, and then underneath that you have the time and temperature grouping, and then you have I guess I still like the Des Moines video display grouping,
Just to
where you have the big umbrella, and then within that, you have the time and temperature that's allowed in more places, and the video display that's allowed in fewer places.
Just to kind of let you know what the industry talks about in terms of terminology, video display usually denotes being the end product being a plasma or an LCD screen. The big plasma screens that you see at the stadiums, those are what they call video displays. That's a true video display. Something like the Speedy Cash sign is basically just an electronic message center with 3 shades of LEDs to create all the colors. So
it's the changing image with that, because, I mean, there are, and I've seen them in Wichita, there are in Des Moines, there are billboards that are plasma screen quality billboards that look like a plasma, like you're watching a color television and plasma screen. So maybe that becomes a third. Those are by far the rarest and most expensive signs.
yeah, in your multi-vision sign, I guarantee you those things are such high maintenance. If we don't have any in our county, or city right now, they're not going to put one of those in. They are the ancient dinosaurs of the sign world. If you're going to have one of those, you're probably going to go ahead and spend the money and put a video display in.
They have one on Wanamaker in Topeka that is that the image changes that way as opposed to dissolving. And
So what you're saying is the electronic display sign would be the
well, we would come up
electronic
with
message center.
yeah, we would, and we would be consistent. Like I said, we have in our ordinance, we have electronic message board or message sign, and then we have our actual definition that's in the ordinance refers to electronic changeable copy sign or computer operated electronic message signs. I think we have one master definition that we use throughout, and that we carve out time and temperature and video display as maybe being kind of extremes at either end, and then you have the middle, that's your electronic message sign. Once we do that, we can create the appropriate categories on our sign permit for one, and then if electronic message center sign is the term of preference, then what we would do is look at some of the things on how long the image has to stay in place, and how bright it can be, and animation and things like that. I think that's actually the easier part. The hardest part has been understanding the technology and classifying the sign. And we have something that said, well, we have another request for an LED sign. I don't know what that means.
What about this? We do the overall as an electronic display sign, subcategory, text only, and graphic. The graphic being understood that we use the definition of Des Moines, Iowa's. We won't use their main video display sign, but we'll consider graphic to mean an electronic display sign upon which multiple color pictures, graphics, and use their definition there. That instantly sort of defines, electronic display being anything that's lit, and then text being time and temp, or graphic.
I mean, I like Olathe's definition for time and temperature.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple to understand. It's limiting. I think everybody understands what that means.
Well, then just consider the other graphic.
Well, the graphic, the issue with the color on graphic, you can have a monochrome display that changes 64 shades of color, and you can still display a graphic on it.
Right, but again, we're not going to allow any of those graphics in the time and temperature anyway, so it's a moot point. We're digging too deep. It's a graphic sign. It's time and temp, graphic.
Yeah, I like that very simple one, time temp definition, a sign displaying time and/or temperature information with no additional advertising or comments.
And graphic is other.
Yeah, everything
How about
else.
that? Everything else.
You seldom have just time and temperature. Usually they have a message or something in between there. I'm thinking
Well-
of the Bicentennial Center
Yeah.
announcing an event or something like that, or a bank announcing an interest rate or something
Right.
like that.
But if it displays that other information, then it would fall out of the category of time and temperature.
Right.
And it would have to
What
be
I'm
in a
saying is this one's
it'd have to be in
I
a
don't think you're
district
gonna
that
find
allowed
this very
those
often.
other types of signs.
The insurance office over at Cloud and Highland
Yeah.
would be one example, and Mid-Kansas Tool over at Cloud and 9th Street would be another example of time temp only.
But you are correct. Say Bennington Bank, they have a sign that has time and temperature on it, but it has interest rates and things like that. That's closer to what Walgreens has.
Right.
Well,
But how are they zoned?
Then you have to be. That's not a time and temperature sign. That's beyond that, and you have to be properly zoned for that. But
So
but-
would there be 3 categories or just 2?
Well, you're probably going to have the time and temperature sign, which is allowed in a C1 and a C2 district, whereas the electronic message center is not. And then, so that takes care of that. The C4 district, I think what we're hearing is that time and temperature is okay in the downtown area, but not the Speedy Cache electronic message center changing graphics type of sign. And so you basically have 4 districts, the residential, the C1, C2, and C4 that would allow would not allow the electronic message center signs at all. And then you have the rest of the districts where then we can address the brightness, the changeability, how the image changes, that type of thing. Some of the things that the Speedy Cache sign does that may be distracting, or you wouldn't want a proliferation of those types of signs. It's really about how frequently the image changes and how it changes.
I don't want to throw a monkey wrench in here, but you've brought up the topic of scoreboard signs that would have basically game information on them before. What's your thoughts on those?
Well, scoreboards themselves are exempt. They're not considered signs as long as they are facing inward to a stadium. If they face outward to the public, then that's a different story. But if I have a sign at Salina Stadium and they want to have a reader board that sells ad space on there, whatever, they can do that. It's because the message and everything is oriented to the inside of the stadium. If they did that and had it oriented out to the street or the neighborhood, then it's a sign. But a scoreboard is not considered a sign.
Well, I remember that we had talked about that at one time. There was something, the scoreboard issue, and I didn't know what the issue was.
Well, what Kansas Wesleyan had done is sell ad space on the outside of their scoreboard, and that really puts it more into the category of a billboard and not a scoreboard. So that is the
Could
distinction
we
here.
probably exempt also the little small, like you can buy at Sam's or whatever, the little small message? I don't know that we need to be regulating those, do we? I mean,
Those would be indoor, though.
like mostly indoor, I think that's covered.
If it's inside, when we have the discussion at the YMCA, if you go into the Bicentennial Center, they have changed their manual, changing the letter signs to an electronic changeable copy sign.
That's okay.
It's inside the building. It's not oriented to the outside. That's not a
That would be a
sign.
plasma video display.
Yeah, didn't the coffee shop across the street kind of had one in their window, and there was maybe an issue with that,
There
or?
was an issue with the one across the way because it wasn't a time and temperature.
But if it's behind their glass, I mean, it kind of in a sense is, even though it's facing outward, that just seems like such a minor little sign to be worried about.
Then one approach to that is to have a square footage exemption.
I'm not trying to throw in it, but it just seemed like such an insignificant little, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, but for the most part, even a window sign, if it's in your window and it's oriented out to the public, that's a sign. If it's inside your store and it's giving you directions, it's not. But I think that's the beauty of signs, is that you could probably devote a staff and a commission and spend 100% of their time on signs, and you could have a sign commission instead of...
Yeah, I said we're close.
Yeah.
Haven't you guys been doing that? Yeah.
That's what we're trying to turn you into. But I think that what we would try to do then is to have a broad definition, and then have a clear, defined time and temperature definition, and then we'll just work on improving this chart here. But to do it, you've got to understand what types of signs are included under that category, and we've got to be able to help Darwin and others, when a sign permit comes in, to classify that appropriately. And it's just very hard to do right now. So you have to understand and keep coming back to the fact that there are signs out there that are not doing everything that they could do.
And along those lines, that there are also changes coming in the future of material that is going to be flexible, and it will appear like a fabric, but it will be able to change a message. So you'll basically have a changeable banners type sign.
What about cars?
Well, that's the other
coming
place it's
too.
going, yeah. But how our stuff, I mean, I think our definition, if we use what we were talking about there, is going to be really close, because A, it's electronic controlled, and B, the message changes no matter what the venue is, whether it's plasma or LED or LCD or this woven fabrics.
Ionized air.
Smoke signals.
Smoke signal. Yeah.
I think if there's one thing we've learned, is that the advertising industry will always be one step ahead of anything we can come up with. But that is what we'll come back with. We really, in order to get what rules or limitations there ought to be on particular types of signs, you have to define them and distinguish them from each other and determine what districts they can be in. And then I think it's actually easier to look at what aspects of that are objectionable, whether it's brightness or flashing or the image changing too fast. Those type of things.
I'd like to mention one other thing. Daktronics is a company that we are an installer for. That's not a secret. And I sent off a copy of the information that we got at the last meeting in regards to some of the data that Dean had given us to help us make a decision. And Daktronics has a legal department that does nothing but analyze all this stuff and all of these changes that are happening to their industry. And I talked to them afterwards, after they read it, and they said, well, you know, the thing that's nice is you're getting a really clear picture of what's actually going on there. They said that what they're having to deal with in some places is departments that are actually trying to justify banning signs.
Yeah.
And I think I have to applaud our department here that we're getting really nice information and both sides of the fence.
So we think good decisions are based on good information, and it may seem like we're giving you too much, but we just think if we're asking you to make decisions, that you need to have good information in front of you to do it.
Thank you.
That's right.
I think that would be all that we would have for you this evening. We do have, again, a meeting scheduled the 15th. I said we appreciate you corresponding back with Linda. For a while, it looked kind of touch and go on the quorum for today, and we know people travel in the summer, and that's certainly fine. It's just we try to, as much as we can, keep our pulse on that. I also wanted to share with you that Mr. Appleby, a member of this committee, was diagnosed with a illness and is undergoing treatment today. And so what his treatment schedule will be and his ability to participate in the future is uncertain. But he said that there was going to be an extended course of treatment, and that he was uncertain. He would try to fulfill his commitment, but if he felt that he couldn't, that he might have to step down. So And that's all I have for you this evening.
If there's nothing else, then the meeting stands adjourned.